Confucius say, "Man who runs behind car get exhausted." I'm just kidding, he didn't actually say that. And there are a bunch of these ridiculous, borderline racist Confucius say jokes that obviously he never said. But I'm not here to talk about those. Instead, I want to look at 10 supposedly reputable quotes that often get attributed to Confucius as selected for us by the good people at Goodreads. And it turns out that they're all fake, with one exception. So here we go, let's look at some famous but mostly fake Confucius quotes today on Frank Philosophy. Okay, the quote that's ranked number 1 on Goodreads, attributed to Confucius. By 3 methods we may learn wisdom. First, by recollection, which is the noblest. Second, by imitation, which is easiest. And third, by experience, which is the bitterest. Okay, so the earliest attribution of this quote is actually from a Victorian-era quote book called The Dictionary of Quotations from Ancient and Modern English and Foreign Sources, published in 1893 by James Wood. But it was almost certainly just a bit of quotable wisdom that was floating around that the author just decided to attribute to Confucius. And recently, some scholars decided to try to track down the source of this quote. There's a great discussion of it on the Chinese philosophy blog, Warp, Weft, and Way. And the consensus is that it's certainly fake, but has some vague similarities with a line from chapter 16 of the Analects, which doesn't really match what's being said here, at all, but at least it could be a loose inspiration. At any rate, it's the closest we've got. Here it is. Confucius said, "Some are born and have knowledge. They are the apex. Those who study and have knowledge come next. Those who struggle to learn but study anyway are next to them. And those who struggle to learn but do not study, they are the lowest kind of people." So you might notice right away that what's being ranked here isn't 3 different kinds of knowledge, but 3 different kinds of people. And this speaks to a more general trend in the Analects that's kind of borderline elitist, insofar as it believes that some people are just naturally more apt to learning than others. But more importantly, it stresses that we have to push ourselves anyway, no matter our aptitude. Maybe some of us are just exceptionally gifted, but the rest of us have to work hard to close the gap. And this definitely speaks to Confucian meritocracy, or the idea that our abilities and our efforts should determine whether or not we have success in life, usually measured at the time by a political position. But he did believe that some of our abilities were indeed determined by nature, as the quote shows. But again, even if you aren't one of these naturally gifted types, you can and should work hard and study anyway to try and close that gap. And that's a pretty good lesson, I guess, but it has nothing to do with the quote. So yeah, fake quote, bad. Okay, on to the next one. "It does not matter how slowly you go as long as you do not stop." Inspiring. Just keep going. Never give up. Very good stuff. But Confucius never said it. It's nowhere in the Analects or any other early Confucian writing, as far as I'm aware. The closest thing we have is a verse from chapter 9 of the Analects. But the actual quote is much longer, and it makes 2 separate points. And it goes like this. "The master said, 'Learning can be compared to raising a mound. If I stop before adding the final bucket, the stopping is my own doing. Learning can be compared to leveling the ground. Though I throw one basketful at a time, it is still progress, and it is my own going forward.'" So these are 2 different but related points being made, and they're only loosely related to that fake quote. The first point is about stopping before we reach the finish line, and how doing so can be all the difference between finishing something successfully and not finishing it. So maybe you're writing an essay, and you have the opportunity to give it one last once-over, but you decide not to. And it turns out that some of the mistakes that you would have caught had you looked it over another time end up costing you some of your grade. That's on you, Confucius says, because that's where you decided to stop. Even if you're just one bucketful away from finishing, you should really keep going. And the second point is about making progress no matter how minimal it may seem. And this kind of relates to the fake quote a little bit. Slow progress is still progress, although the metaphor isn't about speed so much as it is about increment or size, one bucketful at a time. So yeah, pretty good advice, I guess, but still fake quote, bad, no good. All right, quote number 3. "Everything has beauty, but not everyone sees it." Okay, so this is actually a real quote, but it's not from Confucius, and it has nothing to do with Confucianism or the Analects. It's actually attributed to the French sculptor Auguste Rodin, who did The Thinker, and it reads, Beauty is everywhere. It is not that she is lacking to our eye, but our eyes which fail to perceive her. So yeah, a quote from a French artist, not Confucius, and I have no idea how these two things got connected. And Confucius didn't really talk about beauty in the Analects, at least not in the context of like aesthetics. The word for beauty, may, only gets used a handful of times, and usually he just means it in a sort of everyday sense of something being like pretty to look at. And the other context is a bit more ethical or moral when he refers to individuals possessing a sort of beauty in terms of a moral charisma that can inspire others. Because one of the ideas in Confucianism is that moral goodness has a physical manifestation. And this also relates to ideas that show up in ancient Greece about virtue having a physical aspect. So all sorts of fun comparative philosophy points to make there, but nothing to do with this quote. So yeah, fake quote, thumbs down. Okay. On to the next one. Wherever you go, go with all your heart. Okay, this has nothing to do with Confucius or Confucianism. It's just like modern wanderlust Instagram quote kind of thing. I don't know. Definitely fake. Now, Confucius did do a lot of traveling. He was one of the first wandering teachers in ancient China. But he never said anything like this. What he said instead was that whenever you go somewhere for any extended period of time, you should pay attention to the kinds of people who are there already. One line from the Analects reads, "If, when choosing where to live, you do not consider whether there are benevolent people around, how can you be wise?" So it's more about paying attention to the moral quality of the people around you when you decide to live somewhere. Because if you're surrounded by a bunch of non-morally upright people, they might influence you negatively. You might become like them. Lie down with dogs and rise up with fleas, which again is not Confucius. But that's the basic idea. But anyway, this quote, yeah, fake quote, no good. And moving right along, he who knows all the answers has not been asked all the questions. This is definitely not from Confucius. It's just one of those quotable quips that gets paraded around as Confucian wisdom, but doesn't have any basis in the writings. It might be associated with the American journalist and social critic H.L. Mencken, but even that connection is tenuous. But in the interest of charity, I will point out that there is a line in the Analects that makes a similar point about being modest in what you know. It says, "When you know a thing, to hold that you know it, and when you do not know a thing, to allow that you do not know it. This is knowledge." So true knowledge comes in knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know, rather than pretending that you know everything. Pretty good advice, vaguely related in that the original quote is about knowledge also, I guess, but it's still pretty far off the mark. Fake quote, thumbs down. Next one, okay. "The man who moves a mountain begins by carrying away small stones." So this one vaguely relates to the quote that we already discussed about building a mound one bucketful at a time, or about never stopping no matter how slow you're going. And this one touches on a similar theme of doing things no matter how slow the pace might seem. But it's still a fake quote. And the original one that we already discussed is more about raising a mountain and leveling the ground, not moving a mountain from one place to the next. Of course, the overall point is just that small efforts add up over time, but this particular quote still just doesn't have any basis in the Analects. But it does relate a little bit more to one of the writings of a later Confucian named Xunzi. And he wrote in detail about the importance of a concept called accumulation, where the idea is that learning throughout one's life is a process of accumulation, like accumulating dirt to create a mountain. And he did actually write that. But again, that's Xunzi, not Confucius, and it's still wide off the mark of the Goodreads quote. So yeah, fake quote, no good. Moving right along, next quote. "Life is really simple, but we insist on making it complicated." This is not anywhere in the Analects or any other Confucian writing. It's totally just made up. Confucius never talked about life being simple or about us making it complicated. Definitely fake. But if I try really hard, I can think of one quote that kind of relates to this. And it's where he states the golden rule, which is an authentic Confucius quote. There, a student asks if his teachings can be summed up in a single word. And Confucius replies, "Is not reciprocity such a word? What you do not want done to yourself, do not do to others." And I think this relates to the Goodreads quote because Confucius does seem committed to the idea that his teachings have an essential and simple core, namely the golden rule, and everything else sort of just follows from there. But still, that doesn't mean his teachings are simple, and it certainly doesn't mean that life is simple. He would probably deny those things. So yeah, fake quote, and probably one that Confucius would disagree with. Bad. Fake. No good. Alright, on to the next one. If you make a mistake and do not correct it, this is called a mistake. This one is authentic, actually. This is a winner. Well done. This is a true and honest Confucius quote. It comes from Book 15 of the Analects, and it's more or less a pretty solid translation of the authentic original source. And it's a pretty solid piece of advice. If you do something wrong, but you don't fix it, that's also doing something wrong. So when you make a mistake, you could actually make two mistakes by not correcting the first mistake. That's pretty good. Insightful, decent, solid advice. This is an authentic Confucius quote. Moving right along. Study the past if you would define the future. This is not a quote found in the Analects. Confucius never says anything like this. But it does sort of capture the spirit of at least one important aspect of Confucianism, which is an emphasis on studying the past. The Confucians were definitely students of history, and they believed that in order to function effectively in the present, you had to understand the past. Confucius himself famously revered the glorious days of old of the Zhou dynasty. And we see something vaguely similar in Analects 2:11, where it says, "The master said, reviewing the old and deducing the new, this qualifies one to be a teacher." So again, the idea is that we need a strong grip on the past if we want to function effectively in the present. But note that the contrast here is between past and present, not past and future. So at any rate, this is a fake quote, even though it kind of gets at one of the key themes of Confucianism. Fake quote, no good. And saving the best for last, before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig 2 graves. The idea here being that revenge is a pointless exercise that will only get yourself killed, even if you also end up exacting your revenge on whoever has wronged you. This has nothing to do with Confucianism, and Confucius never said it. And in fact, Confucius probably would have disagreed with it, because he's not exactly the turn the other cheek type. In Analects 1434, a disciple asked Confucius about repaying injury with kindness, and Confucius responds as follows. "With what then will you use to respond to kindness? Respond to injury with uprightness, and respond to kindness with kindness." So this isn't really about revenge, of course, but it's how to act when people treat you badly. And Confucius's point is not to turn the other cheek and respond with kindness or grace. Instead, respond with uprightness, which has been interpreted in a few different ways. And definitely not in the sense of having grace or kindness, which is being contrasted with. And that should be reserved for when you are actually treated with kindness. So when people treat you poorly, you should respond with, direct but gentle confrontation? It's kind of hard to say. There's only one word that's supposed to guide your action in this situation. But at any rate, the revenge line itself, definitely not from Confucius, and he probably would have disagreed with it anyway. Bad. Fake quote. No good. So there you have it. 10 famous Confucius quotes, only one of which is actually from Confucius. And of course, a few quotes that are vaguely related to some Confucian ideas. So now, whenever you hear someone attribute one of these quotes to Confucius, you get to be that guy or girl who says, actually, Confucius never said that. Or you can just quietly chuckle to yourself, confident that you know the truth. And that's all for this week. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, feel free to leave a like and subscribe for more Frank Philosophy.